Hey, I'm Dr. Z and I'm a neurosurgeon. So that means long hours, early rounds, late nights, and everything in between. And through it all, I wear figs. Because they're built for what I do. Through the chaos, through the hours, and through whatever the day throws at me, they do their job so I can do mine. They're comfortable when it counts and functional when I need them the most. So where do you wear your figs? On shift, on call, on the couch in the break room, listening to this podcast, wherever it is, they fit right in. And now listeners of this podcast can get 15% off their first order. Just head to wearfigs.com and use code FIGSRX at checkout. That's wearfigs.com, code FIGSRX.
Americans' trust in media hits a new low. And it never was that high to begin with. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. October 2nd of last year, Gallup ran this headline: trust in media at new low of 28% in the United States. Republicans' confidence in mass media to report news fully, accurately, and fairly stood at 8%. Wow, that is pretty low. And there are good reasons why the media has lost much of Americans' trust. And, even when Americans supposedly had all this trust in the news, even when there was just the three major NBC, ABC, CBS news outlets, and you had the somber, stern newsman giving you the news of the day, all the important news of the day in such deep, serious voices, and Americans supposedly could trust their media, like they could trust their government. Really? I'm pretty sure if you took polls like they take polls nowadays, if they took these same type of polls back then, that maybe the trust wasn't as great as we remember it now. I'm sure that there were plenty of issues that people had with the media back then. You just didn't hear about as many because there wasn't, first off, this 24/7 news cycle where you had to fill the airwaves with something, anything. And so that's why you get so many news organizations just rushing to get something out there. Report first, verify later, verify if at all, if something better comes along, flashier, attention grabbing, clickbaiting. So that's sort of how the news cycle goes. And then you add to that social media, which is really lowered the importance of so many of these so-called formerly trusted news sites. And you have this sort of whirlwind of never-ending, frenzied cycle of news. And we're all running to X, we're all running to Instagram, we're all running to all the social media sites to scroll down and get the latest flash of news. And then after we get the headlines there, we run over to some of the more trusted news sources to read the fuller stories. But trusted media at new low of 28% in the United States. And when you break that down further, at 8% among Republicans. Where are the trusted news sites nowadays that we can run to? That's the question. That's the topic of Bold and Blunt today. And before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Real Life Network is the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California. They have a ton of news products there, RLN. Go there, check them all out, but make sure you check out Bold and Blunt there. And make sure, if you haven't already subscribed to Bold and Blunt, you can do so by going to washingtontimes.com. Going to the bottom of the page, finding the newsletter section, click on it and look for the best of Cheryl Chumley. Sign up for my newsletter. You'll get my podcast, my commentaries, my video versions of Bold and Blunt that I do pretty much every Friday now, all delivered to your email box Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, you can get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available, Apple, Spotify, so forth, so on. Just do a Google search on it, a Bing search, a Duck, whatever that one is. What is Duck? Whenever I think of that, I think think DuckDuckGoose. DuckDuckGo, I think is the name. Well, whatever. You can find Bold and Blunt anywhere. And let's get back to this News Gallup survey really quickly. It just came out in October. I'm going to read from it just a little bit. Americans' confidence in the mass media has edged down to a new low, with just 28% expressing a great deal or a fair amount of trust in newspapers, television, and radio to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. This is down from 31% last year, meaning 2024, and 40% 5 years ago. So in 5 years' time, that's pretty significant, from 40% to 28%. Russia. Joe Biden is perfectly healthy. I don't know. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. Meanwhile, 7 in 10 U.S. adults now say they have not very much confidence or none at all in the news. Not very much is 36%, none at all is 34%. When Gallup began measuring trust in the news media in the 1970s, between 68% and 72% of Americans expressed confidence in reporting. So, big jump over the years in terms of how much trust Americans have in the news media to report fairly, accurately, and without bias. Well, some of that could be because of the flood of news sources we have now, right? And the more you have, the more chaotic it gets, and the more reporting you have to sift through, and the more countering viewpoints and different angles you have to sift through. But I really think that a lot of it, and I can say this from the inside, experiencing it firsthand from people I used to work with, there is a decided bias among journalists, which, that's no newsflash there. Of course, if you're human, you have your biases. It's inherent in being human. But there's a denial of bias against conservatives in many of my own colleagues, and they think they are doing the fair thing by, say, going after Republican politicians while doing the fair thing, leaving Democrat politicians alone or reporting favorably on Democrat politicians. It's just their own biases that blind them. And, I'm sure I have my own biases too, but I'm an opinion writer. We all have biases. The trick is, don't deny that you have bias, right? When you're in the news and you're on the news side of things, it's different from opinion. When you're in the news side of things, don't pretend like you're completely unbiased. Don't pretend I am CNN, I am MS Now. Is it MS Now, MSNBC, whatever? I am CBS. I have no bias. It's not true. Just the very fact that you decided to report on this, and this on this given day, but not report on that, and that. That is a selection that you made based on your opinion, fact-based, data-driven it may be. It still is your best guess on what is most important in your view for your readers, for your watchers, for your listeners to hear in news that day. That's a bias, right? And some people are better at concealing their bias than others. CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post, some of these liberal-leaning outlets, not so clever at concealing their bias. Pretty clever, though, I don't know if I'd say clever, pretty determined, though, at insisting that they don't have a bias. Pew Research did this good poll, too, in December, even more recent than this Gallup one from October. They looked at what younger people are looking at for their news. Where do those aged 18 to 29 get their news from? My guess off the top, I haven't really read through this yet, my guess, social media, TikTok, right? TikTok videos. That's what's that? Gen Z? all about the quick headline. I'm fully informed. You don't have to tell me anything. I got my 29 character news of the day. I'm good. Or I clicked on a few TikTok videos. Now I'm fully informed. I can tell you all the problems with the economy and why Trump is screwing everything up, right? That's sort of my guess of where the 18 to 29 segment of society get their news. So let's see what Pew found. Young adults are less likely to follow the news, Pew writes. Attention to news in the United States, measured by the share of adults who say they follow news all or most of the time, has declined across all age groups since 2016. Young adults have consistently had the lowest levels. As of 2025, 15% of young adults say they follow the news all or most of the time. Comparatively, 62% of the oldest Americans say they do this, about 4 times as many. So older Americans, about 4 times as many as younger Americans, consume news, watch news, listen to news. What's the other one? Watch news, read news. This holds true for different types of news. Pew finds young adults are less likely than all older age groups to say they closely follow national and local news. They also differ in the news topics they follow. They tend to be less likely than older adults to say they often or extremely often get news about government and politics, science and technology, and business and finance. Well, what else is there? What other news is there? Oh, here we go. About a third, 32%, of adults under 30 say they get entertainment news extremely often, compared with 13% of the oldest adults, those 65 and older. So they love their entertainment news. When asked how often they seek out the news, about 1 in 5 young adults, or 22%, say they do so often or extremely often. Compare that to older adults. A different level of older adults, right? Significantly more older adults say they seek out news. Here we go. This is what I said. Social media. Social media is a common place for incidental news exposure. Why do younger adults follow the news less closely? One possibility is that young adults are much less likely to feel attached to their community than their elders. Another reason is the way the news makes them feel. Young people are more likely to say the news they get makes them feel scared or confused, with 33% saying it makes them feel each of these emotions often or extremely often. Oh, cue mini violin, please. They feel scared. I'm so scared. I tried to avoid it for my sanity, a 24-year-old woman said. Pew wrote, if I watch too much of the negativity in the news, it affects my mood. Where are my gummies? Where's my CBD gummies? I don't know if I should keep reading this. Let me read just a little bit more where young adults get news, because this is what I was talking about. My guess. They stand out from older Americans in where they get their news. They are generally less likely than older Americans to get their news from traditional platforms like television and radio. Instead, 93% say they at least sometimes get news from digital devices. There you go. They're on their phones, right? They're on their smartphones. They're most likely to get news on social media. That's a problem, right? Because social media rarely gives the complete story. So if you take away the findings of this survey, along with Gallup, right? Gallup shows that Americans have less trust in the news in general. Pew shows that younger adults, those 18 to 29 years old, aren't really consuming news above and beyond entertainment news. And then when they do look for news, they go on social media and get it from, their social media platforms, videos, TikTok, just brief headlines, trolls that post because they have nothing better to do and they think they're informed, and they're not. It just shows the trend in news does not look good, right? The trend for the news field in general does not look good. It means that young people really don't see any need to go into media because they will just post, right? If they feel like they have a phone, they can take their own videos, they can be their own journalists, and all their friends and all their fellow Gen Zers can be their own journalists as well. So they can just follow their social media sites and get the latest videos that someone takes at an accident scene or a protest or an anti-ICE campaign or a political rally or what have you. And that's it. They feel like they got their news for that day. That's not very good. That's not very good for the state of my own media industry. So what to do. I have a guest today. His name is Ryan Wolfe. He is director at the Fund for American Studies Center for Excellence in Journalism. And TFAS is a program that I am affiliated with. I was a journalism fellow with this program years and years ago. But Ryan Wolfe is here to talk about a new initiative of this TFAS outlet that trains journalists in the way to go. It typically trains conservative journalists in the way to go, but it has made inroads at the Washington Post and the Boston Globe, of all places. Ryan Wolfe, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. So great to have you here.
Yes, thanks so much for having me on.
So let's talk about this new journalism program that the Fund for American Studies is sponsoring. It's to place journalists at the Washington Post and Boston Globe opinion pages. Talk a little bit about what's going on.
Sure, yeah. Well, at the Fund for American Studies, we launched the Center for Excellence in Journalism in 2023. Prior to that, we had started this program called the Joseph Rego Fellowship at the Wall Street Journal, which places fellows on their opinion page. So we started that in 2018, been doing that program for about 7 years now. And so we just saw an opportunity in the media marketplace. There's a lot of opinion pages looking for smart, young journalists that are willing to offer up perhaps different perspectives than these opinion pages maybe are traditionally used to hearing. And so we saw the need. We have a great pool of young talent that is eager to work at places like this. And so we're really excited to get these fellowships up and running.
And just to explain a little bit more, the Fund for American Studies leans a little bit conservative, at least, because of the affiliation with Robert Novak. True?
Of course, yes. Yep. We are right of center. I would say, conservatives, libertarians, free-thinking students of all kinds, and young people. That's our main audience.
So with that in mind, explain how difficult, or explain the process to place now fellows with Washington Post and Boston Globe, which lean left.
Sure, yeah. I mean, well, I'll start with the Washington Post because I think that's a pretty unique situation. They've changed their opinion page a lot with a new kind of, free market, free thinking approach to the opinion page. So they've hired some young, great writers. Karine Hajar, who was a Rego Fellow for us at the Wall Street Journal a few years ago, is now on their editorial board and an opinion writer there. Dominic Pino, who's one of the best free market writers, went over there from National Review. And Adam O'Neill, who was at the Wall Street Journal for many years, is their new opinion editor. So they are taking a different approach, and I think we're really excited to partner with them in that. And if you are a free market or conservative person and you haven't checked out the Washington Post opinion page in a while, I would recommend you go and take a look. You might be surprised by what you find. So that's the Washington Post. The Boston Globe, is a little different. It's for sure a more left leaning opinion page, but their editor there, Jim Dow, I think has an approach of wanting lots of voices represented, as well as their ownership, and so they were eager to work with us, and I think they had a really good experience with aforementioned Karine Hajar, who went to the Globe after the Journal, and her experience there was great, and so we're really excited to work with them. And they'll have, counting our future fellow, probably, three right of center, broadly speaking, voices on their opinion page.
Any concerns about these fellows going to these traditionally left-wing outlets, news outlets, and on the commentary pages, and being turned into propaganda tools for the left? Any concerns with that at all?
Yeah, that's always, I think, like an important question. I think my view is the best thing you can do is select fellows who have, strongly held beliefs and principles, and have them working with an editor that wants them to, apply those to news events happening right now, and be able to express those, as opposed to only being allowed to write, a certain kind of piece because it would play well with a more left-wing readership. And I think, all the folks that we're working with want sort of a pluralistic opinion page that has lots of different views, and they're definitely willing to let the fellows write and say what they have to say, as opposed to just trying to make them fit a particular mold.
It's sort of interesting what's been taking place in the world of journalism just in the last couple years. It seems like you already mentioned Washington Post, and I think we all remember when the Washington Post said that it wanted to hire specifically a conservative editor for the opinion pages. But you've got Scott Jennings at CNN. You've got Barry Weiss now taking over news at CBS. What's going on in journalism? What do you attribute this sort of move, or at least open embrace of some in the conservative field now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's just a response to what audiences are looking for. I think the fact is fewer and fewer people are consuming traditional media. So fewer and fewer people subscribe to the print edition of, the Wall Street Journal or New York Times or Washington Post. Fewer people watch network news. And so in their quest to sort of have more readers, viewers, larger audiences, they've realized, hey, we can't just count out half the country. And so they are looking, I think, to change both kind of their news coverage and how they, approach covering issues that people have, vastly different opinions on. And then you also are seeing them looking for different voices to, be talking heads or opinion writers on their channels and opinion pages. So, I think it's a broader trend in the media that's more or less pointing to, hey, we can't just rely on the same old audience anymore.
But do you think it's driven by financial concerns, or do you think that these sort of leftist, executives in the media world have had an awakening to the fact that they've been so unwelcoming of conservative voices, and they feel a little bit apologetic for that? Which do you attribute it to?
Yeah, I think there has been an awakening of sorts. I think one just really key event from the past, 10 years was, there's really two. One was 2020, when the New York Times chose to run an opinion piece from Tom Cotton saying to send in the troops to stop the unrest in our inner cities. And that led to pretty much all the leadership of the New York Times opinion page, including Barry Weiss, who was there at the time, resigning, getting let go, getting reassigned, and leaving eventually. But that was a pretty big event, because I think a lot of those folks are still working in the media and have a very different view of sort of what an ideal staff member looks like. informed by kind of the mob experience they dealt with at the New York Times. The other thing I would point to is October 7th, and I think a lot of Jewish, executives, writers, editors started to see how some of their colleagues reacted and were pretty appalled by it. And so I think both of those events really started to change how people perceived, like, what does a good hire on my team in journalism look like? And I think both of those events combined with market forces have really started to shift just the overall media landscape in ways that, we wouldn't have predicted 10 years ago.
So, you, as director of TFAS's Center for Excellence in Journalism, I'm interested in your assessment of this. What, in your opinion, would make an excellent opinion page of a news outlet, of a newspaper?
Sure. Well, you could start with good writing. High quality prose is often really what makes people come back and keep reading. The Wall Street Journal opinion page is a great example of this. If you read their editorials, they're always, focusing on important issues, but they're also fun to read. So I think that's one big thing. I think having really interesting writers that can write different kinds of pieces, some more serious policy articles are important, as are more cultural type articles. So I think having sort of a variance in topics that keeps you interested and drawn in, combined with really high quality writing and prose. And, I think everyone looks for names they know. So that's pretty important too. You want to have some big names that people recognize and like. And if you have those, I think that's a great recipe for success.
So let's just wrap up with a couple of other questions, talking about the trust in media. Trust in media has just fallen sharply the last few years. What are some of the key ingredients that you see in restoring trust in media? Or honestly, is it really necessary? It's kind of a good thing when people question the media, like when they question the government.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, trust in institutions, pretty much any kind of institution you look up, has gone down. I think a lot of it is there's sort of a social media, X and perhaps Blue Sky in some circumstances have created a new layer of transparency. So you can really see what, the writers and staff are thinking, and what they're saying in public in ways that you couldn't do unless you hung out in, the bars in DC or New York. So that has really, I think, changed the trust equation for every institution, but especially the media, where I think a lot of journalists see it as part of their job to, send out tweets and be public figures in that way, in a way that may not actually be helpful to their credibility. Generally speaking, I think the trust in the institutions has dropped because it's been deserved and earned, and so I kind of agree with you in the sense of that it's probably not bad people question it, because the veil kind of lifting with social media has showed us lots of things that we probably wouldn't want. And, these news publications can change who they hire or have social media policies. And a lot of them for a very long time did not really do that. So I think the trust in media is low for a reason. I think building it back is a very good goal, because the media is still pretty important. It's how people get their information. It's how our country understands itself in many ways. So, I really think what, the opinion page at the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal and Boston Globe are trying to do, I think, as well as, the changes at CBS News, are all sort of targeted towards, hey, we need to have a broader minded approach here in order to win back people's trust. And, I think assuming lots of other people follow along, which I think is the hope and the strategy here, that's a good way, I think, to just start getting trust back up and higher, or at least trust in maybe specific outlets up and higher.
One more question, Ryan. I was just seeing this morning headlines that the FCC is going to start cracking down on news talk shows when they have a candidate from the Democrat Party on, they have to have a candidate from the Republican Party on. How is your thought? What's your view of that? Of government forcing media outlets to have more balanced coverage?
Sure. I can understand why conservatives, Republicans would want that kind of change. But I would just ask everyone to remember, if you're old enough, or go read about it if you're not, the time of the fairness doctrine and how that affected the media, which was that there was no Fox News, there was no talk radio, there was no sort of way to get conservative voices out. So we should just be careful that if the shoe, ends up on the other foot here and the fairness doctrine comes back, will a lot of the voices that we value, the channels that we like to watch, be forced into doing things that they don't want to do? So that would be my word of caution, because pre-fairness doctrine media, I don't think was the best for conservatives. And you can go read the back issues of National Review and see a lot of complaining about that.
Yeah, these short-term solutions rarely work out well, especially for conservatives. So, Ryan, how can people apply for the Fund for American Studies Journalism Fellowships?
Yeah, that's a great question. Head over to our website, tfas.org/JEF. Drop us your name and email, and we will reach out with more information about the application.
Excellent. Ryan Wolfe, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. Great discussion.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that's another Bold and Blunt. And in the interest of disclosure, I am a journalism fellow with the Fund for American Studies back when it was called the Robert Novak Journalism and Fellowship, and really back before even that, when it was called the Phillips Foundation Journalism Fellowship. But anyhow, check it out. It's a great program for budding journalists. I want to thank you for listening. Remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.